Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today I wanted to do a video on Baroque keyboard style because most students find it very difficult because it's so far removed from modern keyboard styles. So for reference sake, and I'll link this on the screen, but a couple pieces in the past that we've done that are in Baroque style is the Minuetto by James Hook that we did a long time ago, as well as, Bourrée number 11 from the Notebook for Wolfgang. So I'll link them up here, so if you want to check them out and kind of see more examples and context, then you can. Just so we're all on the same page here, Baroque music happened between the year 1600 and 1750, and some of the most famous Baroque composers included Handel, Bach, and Scarlatti, on keyboard anyway. So I want to show you a really quick audio clip of a composition, an English suite by Bach, just so you can get a sense of like the standard Baroque style, so when we talk about it more in depth, it'll be more in your head. So you might have a few thoughts after listening to that it sounds maybe really old or ornate or difficult or anything like that. So despite the common assumption that Baroque music is really strict, and I actually find this is really cool, there's actually a strong element of improvisation. So improvisation is just when composers essentially make stuff up on the spot. You're probably familiar with improvisation in jazz music, for example. And we don't often associate that element in Baroque music or older classical music. So keyboard musicians often played for music like this, which is called figured bass, where the bass line, you can see this is the bass clef, so the bass line is notated along with what's basically just a chord symbol. And this is like the 300 years ago version of chord symbols. So they'd play this in the bass clef, like these notes, and then in the right hand, they would flesh these out as full chords, and they would just kind of improvise their own pattern based on this information. To compare it to modern times, that would be basically like these chord symbols that you kind of know and are getting familiar with. This is just like the modern version of that Baroque figured bass. It took, and it takes, a lot of skill to improvise based on chords, because you need to know an immense variety of chords at the drop of a hat. So those Baroque keyboard players were skilled. Another thing that I find really fascinating, but also really challenging about Baroque music, is its use of counterpoint. Now, counterpoint is basically, in simplest terms, just two or more completely different parts going at the same time. So in the case of maybe like a simple Baroque composition, all that means is that the left-hand part is independent and the right-hand part is independent. And when they get played at the same time, it creates a sense of harmony that way, with like the two independent lines sort of supporting each other. Now, this is in direct contrast to more modern music, which has more of like the chords and melody structure. So where the left hand oftentimes will form a supporting role to the right hand by doing like a chord or accompaniment pattern. So instead of like with counterpoint, instead of the left hand supporting the right hand, both hands are kind of like completely independent and on their own track. So I want to play that Bach clip again, and I want you to listen to it again and really try to keep your ears open for that counterpoint, for those split parts. You'll be able to hear like the lower bass left-hand notes as distinct from the upper right-hand notes. Really listen how they both can hold their own if you split them apart, and together they create something magical. Before the Baroque era, instrumental music was mainly just functional, and the function it served for the most part was for dancing. But in the Baroque era, the instrumental music started evolving beyond use in the dance floor. So what would happen is these dance pieces were no longer just danced to. Sometimes people would just listen to instrumental music and not dance. And because of this, because it became sort of its own independent genre, people would just like kind of sit down and listen to music, it became more elaborate and more virtuosic. So that's why when you're playing Baroque music, they'll often have titles like Allemande or Gavotte or, Minuet or any number of, different type of dances, because those dance styles and dance forms were really popular in the day. It's just people weren't necessarily dancing to them anymore. I just wanted to also talk briefly about the instruments themselves, the keyboards. So the early version of the piano as we know it, which is called the pianoforte, didn't even come into existence or popularity until the late 1700s, which was the classical era of music, guys like, Mozart and Beethoven and stuff. So they didn't really have those back in Bach's day and Handel's day. So keyboard music was generally composed on either an organ, a clavichord, or a harpsichord. So one thing that this does, the different instruments and composing for them, is, so say you have a song idea and you're like, man, I really want to write a song, and you write it on a guitar instead of a piano. The idea is going to come out completely different than it would if you had written the idea on a piano, skill level aside. And the same is true when composers would write for a harpsichord as opposed to a modern piano. The sound just ends up coming out differently, and as a result, they write the music differently to suit the sound of the instrument. So let's take a really quick listen to what a harpsichord sounds like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. So you can hear that the harpsichord sounds like much more harsh and abrasive in comparison to sort of like the smooth mellowness of our modern piano. So because of this, the composers of the time, they couldn't really write like dreamy or ethereal or overly emotional or, subtle music, because the instrument just can't convey subtlety. A harpsichord is all about sort of like detached notes and vivid contrasts. So that's why you won't see that type of music written in the Baroque era for piano, because it wasn't possible. The harpsichord couldn't do it. And that concludes our discussion on Baroque keyboard music today. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the little area below with the comments and stuff like that. Also, send this video a like if you want to see more videos of this ilk, and visit pianotv.net if you want to keep updated on new videos and stuff like that. Thank you, and toodaloo. Just so we're all on the same